one quick question. How do we solve now for the problem that people talk about AI and like these chat GPTs and all this stuff are going to give us a biased framework based on what they've been taught to learn?
Yeah.
And there's truth in that. So people will be like, well, I asked to search for blank and it told me I cannot tell you that information because it would be, harmful to this race or to that person or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Is that just inherent at this point in the process? That you're going to have bias? Are we going to have like right-wing AI and left-wing AI? Like we're the AI of the right. Go with us.
So listen, I'll give you, I'm a technologist at heart. And so I'll sort of give you a view on, how fundamentally the technology works. The way it works today is it really is built on two components. One is the data set that you feed into the AI model, right? So when everyone's talking about building, large language models, LLMs, it's effectively the data set. And the larger the data set, the better the AI engine, right? So that's sort of one component. The other component on AI is pattern recognition, which is looking at all of this data that's getting ingested and saying, can I do pattern recognition so I can give, an intelligent, informed answer? And the reality with any data injection, data model is that it is heavily dependent on the data that you input. And so if the data tends to incline responses one way or the other, that's how the pattern recognition is going to work, which is why the key to a good functioning AI is a large data set that assesses essentially views across the spectrum, and you keep ingesting updated data, which is also why, back to the conversation that, you and I were having earlier, to do data sets of that magnitude, you're talking about an immense amount of compute that needs to go behind it. Like, Zuckerberg recently announced the release of Meta's new, LLM, and, made it open source, which I think is actually a historic move for the industry. But that model, if you look at that, the size of that model in like a year or two from now, it's going to seem minuscule to what we're going to see just in the next 18 to 24 months.
So that's interesting. And just last point on this, but that open source model, right?
Yeah.
So to me, to some extent, what that's suggesting, tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a technologist, but when you were answering the question, I was thinking the simplest thing would be, A, don't limit the data the AI model can have.
Yeah.
Don't try to give it parameters on what's racially okay to say, what's socially acceptable, what's misinformation, non-misinformation, whatever other things people come up with that fall in the box, don't give it our social norms and tell it this is the only information you get. Let it look at everything.
Correct.
Essentially tell it you can't destroy the world.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very simplified. Doesn't the open source approach kind of do that, kind of suggest it could have access to far more types of data versus being controlled by whatever the platforms already accepted?
It's a great point. If we truly want AI to reflect all of society, it has to essentially take all of society's data.
The good and the bad.
Everything, right? And, if you sort of, and that is really where we need to go. And the constraint around that, again, is just compute resources, which is why we think of, Amazon recently announcing that they're going to invest $100 billion in AI data centers, right? You're going to see similar numbers from Microsoft and Google and OpenAI and Meta and others. And, what's exciting for us as part of this industry is for us to get to what you describe as AI that's truly reflective of all of society. You need these immense computing resources to be behind the movement. And that's where companies like Mawson and others can play a key role in providing the compute infrastructure so AI can truly reflect all of the data that we have available.
Right. So last quick question on this, that we'll talk about ETS, but 30 seconds on this. It's an answer you could probably go on for a long time. Isn't it hypothetically possible that no matter what parameters we set as the AI grows in its power, it will find a way to acquire information even if we told it it can't? Wouldn't it kind of naturally, simply, in its mission to be most informative, go, well, you didn't tell me this stuff, but I managed to find it anyway, and I'm bringing it into the mix? Wouldn't it just inherently do that out of kind of curiosity with the mission to, or is that, am I just making that up?
No, listen, I get asked that all of the time. And I think, fundamentally, if you think about how AI works, it follows first principles, which is you've got to tell the AI model that these are your first principles. If its first principles are ingest as much data as you can, learn as much as you can, analyze as much as you can, and then you determine what the right decision is, it's going to look to us to provide the parameters based on which it makes those decisions. And that's where I think we actually aren't having enough of a conversation, which is when we're building these large LLM models and we're, eventually going to build a general artificial intelligence engine. What do we, all of us, collectively believe are the first principles that we should be having for this AI? Because that input is going to essentially drive what AI will become eventually. And that's where I think we need to have a lot more conversation.